Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's episode of Ask Sibs. I have to say, I am feeling a bit more back to life again. I had a ridiculously busy Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. As I mentioned briefly, Monday and Tuesday, I didn't even manage to go live. And yesterday, as thoroughly enjoyable as going live and the general day was, I was just really tired last night. So I got a super early night and had a really good sleep, had a shave, and just generally feeling a little bit more rejuvenated and revitalized, which is nice. I think I do talk a lot more about the sort of need to look after ourselves and work-life balance, and I think there are times and days where we just have to do a lot of hours and things can be difficult. So yesterday we talked about bouncing back from setbacks and negativity. And I think, it's a lot easier to bounce back from difficult times when we're actually got the energy and the health to do so. So, just a little point there on how I'm feeling more bright eyed and bushy tailed. I love that expression. Always sounds so cool. So, today I'm looking at what is your strongest attribute as a person, and it's inspired. Ross has just put shaving, embrace the beard with a laughing face. I know Ross is rocking the beard at the moment, which I do like a bit of a stubble and a bit of a beard, but after a while it gets a bit itchy. And also, I feel today particularly just revitalized for having had a shave. But no, I'm with you there, Ross. Definitely with you. The point, the question I'm answering today around my strongest attribute as a person was inspired. I've done a lot of conferences and podcast interviews the last few days, which is partly why I've been busy. And then there's a couple of other parts as to why I've been busy as well within Purple Goat. But no, basically, I was on this podcast interview last night called Tea with Mike. Really lovely guy. I think we randomly got chatting on Twitter. He's an English guy that is doing some really, really good stuff on sort of podcast and content creation. But his passion, his love is tea. So hence Tea with Mike. He's had some cool guests on the podcast, and he's just a really nice guy. I really enjoyed chatting to him. And he asked me some really good questions. I'm going to share the once it goes live on the weekend, I'll share the podcast interview in its entirety. But I've done a lot of different kind of interviews and public speaking, and I definitely got to the point where sometimes I feel like I'm repeating myself, and sometimes that's fine because the audience hasn't ever actually seen or heard of me before. So as much as I maybe feel repetitive, they haven't heard this stuff and they're hearing it for the first time. So that's all good as a general point, but I definitely feel like I'm answering similar questions in similar ways. Anyway, Mike was asking me a few things around my disability and growing up and the barriers in society and all that kind of stuff. And he was asking me about what it was almost like what my big tip is around. I think Sunny's coming in there about what my tip is for sort of particularly managing the care team, maybe even in business as well. And so he didn't specifically ask me about communication, but I think a few questions I was reflecting that the answer for me is communication. And I shared something with Mike that I want to share with you today, which is that I often wondered if I didn't have spinal muscular atrophy and I wasn't disabled, then would I have similar or the same personality traits and indeed general life experiences? Now that's very sort of philosophical, very difficult to even quantify, right? Like, of course, all of our life experiences kind of shape who we are and who we become. And so I think in some senses, the answer to that question is obviously there would be differences if I wasn't disabled and needing a wheelchair and needing the care assistance. But I definitely wonder and ponder. I know that communication is one of my biggest strengths. So I think the direct answer to the question, what's my strongest attribute, is absolutely communication. Writing, doing podcasts, making videos, doing public speaking, generally just with personal life, professional life. I always just really enjoy being with people and networking. And yeah, so communication is just definitely one of my strongest attributes. But yeah, I was sort of thinking, well, would that be, would I be as good a communicator if I didn't have to, for the most basic parts of my needs? Obviously, since day one, we're all babies, right? But as I got to like 3 years old and I got my first wheelchair, I was having to communicate to my parents and then to the school learning assistant, all that kind of stuff, right? Like having to say, can I have help to go to the toilet? Can I have help to get food? And later on I wanted to go even to like parties and nightclubbing, and it was, mum or dad, can you help me get picked up, because there wasn't accessible transport, and it's still difficulties now, but there are probably arguably better provision of accessible taxis and stuff. But yeah, and even separate to whether there's a taxi with a ramp or not, it was just harder to be fully independent. And so communication became a really big part of, I suppose, being able to ask for assistance. But and one thing I was chatting about with Mike is, with my PAs, and I know this is a very different style for different disabled people. There are disabled people that are very much it's a professional thing with the personal care assistants, and they don't want to get more social or personal, and that's totally fine. Like, there's no right or wrong. But for me, I feel that in taking the time to genuinely, not manipulatively, not doing it as a way to get a selfish end out of it, but just because I genuinely am so curious about people and their life and everything, to actually take the time to get to know my personal care assistants. And indeed, this is the same in all parts of life. But yeah, I think it's just a better interaction. And I definitely feel like, as a broader universal statement, the more we give and look to help others, the more we get back. And I think, being a good communicator is definitely a part of that. Marnie on LinkedIn, a fellow SMAer, my mum and I were having the same conversation the other day about what path I think my life would have taken if I wasn't disabled. It's strange to think about. And it really is, Marnie, isn't it? Like, we know there are disabled people that aren't as strong an attribute as communication, because, disabled people, we're not a homogenous group of people. We're all very different. So obviously there are disabled people that communication isn't their strongest attribute. But I do sometimes, coming back to that point, wonder if I'm a better communicator because of those circumstances. And I really appreciate you joining that, Marnie, and sharing that you've had similar thoughts and similar conversations. And not just about our attributes, but would we be doing the same job? Would we have, had other opportunities that have come along because of that trajectory of our life? And Rebecca, these qualities really shine through, Martin, and definitely your strongest attribute. Thank you, Rebecca. I'd be interested to, Rebecca, what your strongest attribute is. And I'll put that out to everyone watching now and watching later. Just, it's really an interesting thing on a sort of personal development level, really, to consider individually what is our strongest attribute. And I definitely feel that playing to the strongest attribute is the best way in life. Of course, we want to, better ourselves and work on our weaknesses and grow in those sort of ways. But I also think when we double down on what we're good at and what we enjoy, we get a lot more out of it. The world gets a lot more out of it. And that's where partnering and collaborating and teamwork's brilliant, because we all can bring, different attributes to it. Okay, Ken has written something on my Facebook. It talks about an affiliate marketing guide. So I'm not quite sure, apart from wanting me to plug your guide, Ken, if there's an actual question there. But if there's any, I don't know if you're asking for assistance on how to get the guide out there. But otherwise, I'm not going to share it because it just looks like a little bit of a plug going on there, to be honest. Marnie saying, I think when it comes to communication and being disabled, for me, it has taught me to stand up for myself without being confrontational, to say when something isn't right, but in a constructive manner in order to reach a solution. I think I talked a bit earlier about one of the ways I've always been with my personal care assistants is quite friendly and sociable and amenable, and that definitely has had a positive. But I absolutely agree with your point there, Marnie, that obviously with the personal care assistants, there has to be boundaries around the fact it is a job and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, in general, it's very hard when we rely on other people for so many things to have our own needs and wants seen to. And if someone is impacting that negatively, how to tell them that it's not what we need or want, or generally to back down or back off. But I think we're similar, Marnie, not wanting to have awkward confrontation. You don't want to come across like you're just being rude or off or angry. But if we don't communicate and express when something isn't working, then I've definitely had situations over the years where, I've had to almost suffer a bit for not wanting confrontation and not wanting to rock the apple cart. Then I've ended up not being as happy myself. Kevin doing some round of applause to what Marnie said, in full agreement. And William saying to make the best out of any situation. I presume, William, is that your strongest attribute? I'm going to take that as a response to that question. And if so, I think that's a great attribute to have, whatever the situation. And that very much, if you didn't see it, speaks to yesterday's live stream about bouncing back from setbacks and negativity. And it talked a lot about gratitude and making the best of what we've got. So absolutely agree with you there, William. Okie dokie. Well, I think that's the end of what I wanted to share on today's. Yeah, William's just saying yes with exclamation marks. So thank you for sharing that, William. So that's the end of what I wanted to share. Really great engagement today, guys. It's lovely to have conversations with you on these topics and get your own insights and what you feel about the topics, because my intention isn't to only share my own experience and thoughts, but to create conversation. So I really appreciate you all for joining in on today's live stream. Tomorrow is Friday. I'm glad I'm not limping in metaphorically to Friday like I sometimes have been, feeling a bit more sprightly than usual. So hopefully my end of the week won't be too exhausting, but I'm definitely looking forward to the weekend after tomorrow. Anyway, Tottenham are playing Liverpool tonight, so back to Ross, who was writing earlier about beards. He's a Liverpool fan, I'm a Tottenham fan, so we'll see what happens on the result and if me and him are still friends after that today. And basically have a really good Thursday afternoon, and I will see you tomorrow for the last one of the week. All right, take care. Bye.